Hey guys, Sydney Bray-Gwynn. Here's everything you need to know about starting a detailing business in 2025. In today's video, we are going to cover making a plan. We're going to do marketing for that plan. Then we're going to go into all the tools and processes and products that you might need to get set up. And then finally, we're going to round it out with some final tips, as well as everything I wish I would have known when I started. First things first, you need a plan. So you are going to want to identify a business name, and you want to make this fun, something that reflects you, your personality. This was something that maybe I would have changed looking back. I would have thought of something more tailored to me as a person. So you want to come up with a fun name, something that clients are going to remember and that's going to be a little bit catchy. Second thing is you want all appropriate licenses, permitting, anything that your state or county requires you to have. Just do that from the beginning. It cuts out a lot of hassle in the future. You also want to make sure you get insurance. So again, you want to speak with a good insurance broker, tell them what you're planning on doing, what the business looks like, because you want to make sure that you're appropriately insured. And then lastly, under your plan, the most important thing is you've got to know your market. Who are you targeting? What kind of services do you want to do? What kind of vehicles do you want to do? Do you want to be a fixed location? Do you want to do a home shop? Do you want to be mobile? So you kind of have to have a plan of what type of business you want to run. And just because you identify that in the beginning doesn't mean that you're not going to grow beyond that. When I started my business, all of these things were very important. And so what I did is I had two little kids at the time. I wanted to be in a home shop. So that was my focus and that was my limits of what I needed to do. I didn't ever want to be mobile because I wanted to work at my home. It just worked better with my kids' school. And I also didn't want to work outside the home. So I never really had any aspirations to be in a shop. So I had to look at where I lived, my demographic, who my target audience was, and build my business around that. Now, I wanted to primarily run my shop almost like an auto spa. So I wanted it to be a little bit higher end. I only wanted to see one customer a day. I wanted to spend the day with their vehicle and reset it to like new as possible. So I wasn't looking at getting into like production detailing. I didn't want to do car dealerships. So that's just an important thing to identify so that you're not setting yourself up for frustration or failure. And then I also looked at my demographic. I was going to, because of where my shop is located, I was definitely, targeting more of family vehicles, a lot of folks that were more recreational. So I had to be set up for that. And they all were going to live within, a pretty close proximity to me. So then I had to identify, drop off, pickup, maybe issues with the fact that it was in my home and that they were going to have to drop it off at my home. So it's helpful to kind of identify who your market is, who you're going after, and kind of stick to that to avoid frustration. Next up is marketing. This is probably my favorite subject, but what's so funny about my business is this was where I focused the least of my budget. So it's not that I focused little on marketing, but I focused a little of my budget on it, and I'll tell you why. So first, you need to have a phone number. One of the things I did that I kind of regret was that I used my personal cell phone that I had at the time, because in my mind, I limited my business. I never thought it was going to get so big. And so I used a phone number that, I had transferred from another state. So I don't actually have a local number to my area. So one big thing is I would get a secondary cell phone and make sure you have a local number to that area. That way customers know that you are a local detailer and it makes you seem more legitimate. Number two would be make sure you have an email. People have different ways of communicating. Some may prefer to communicate through social media, phone, website, email. So you've got to cover all the bases. Then website. Do you need a website? So I've been in business for 13 years. I still don't have a website, but that is because of the way that I set up my business as kind of that referral based only. And so I didn't need a website, but I do probably highly recommend it. And then you need to make sure you set up your social media channels. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever heard somebody give was set those channels up before you launch your business and start to get engagement on them, start to post photos and things maybe before you even publish that page, just so that you already have established content. So even as you're going through learning, setting things up, that is a great way to establish that channel. So then let's talk about marketing as far as how do you get your business out there? Because I didn't have a ton of money and I didn't start off with a bang. I was just doing, a car here and there. My marketing budget was zero. So I had to rely on myself, advertising myself, word of mouth, asking my customers for that referral. I didn't have money to run ads. I didn't have money to sponsor ads or do any giveaways or anything like that. And so after a couple years, I was only running a referral-based business, had no investment in that. It was just me giving really good customer service, giving a good product, and then asking for the referral. And I promise this was probably one of the best things I did in my business was running it off referral-based only. So most shops, detailers out there, you're gonna have to run ads, you're gonna have to do all that, but you wanna make sure that you're spending your money wisely. One of my favorite things is going into your local community groups and sharing your detailing page there. That is a really, really good way for customers to get to know you. And then when they see somebody pop up and say, where can I find a detailer in the Philadelphia area? Your customers are gonna see that on that community page and they're gonna answer your name. So definitely join all local communities. Another good way is to join local business networking groups. So in most cities, there is somebody that puts on like a breakfast, lunch, something like that, where companies go and they network and they share their businesses. This is a super powerful tool that not a lot of people use because you're going to run into realtors, contractors, business owners. That's what they're there for, is to network and share your name. So they will end up using your services and then they're going to tell everybody. So that is such a powerful resource. And then I'm going to have to come back to the content. We live in a content-driven society right now. So even if you don't use the pictures, take them. Take the video, take the pictures, know how to market that, and make sure you're posting your work because then the customers really love that. And again, they love to share that. So I personally am all about the free marketing, and there's lots of ways to be creative with that. None of this is like gospel. It's just the experience that I had that worked for me, but you definitely just want to have a marketing plan. It's okay to spend money on marketing. Just make sure you're doing it wisely. One of the biggest mistakes that I see detailers make right now is they're sponsoring their Facebook ads and they sponsor it in demographics that they don't even serve. So make sure if you are paying to sponsor on social media that you're narrowing it down to your local area, customers that are actually going to call you and book. Okay, and lastly on this subject, make sure that your branding stays consistent. People respond at seeing branding multiple times, so you wanna make sure you stay super consistent, make it look very professional. You wanna charge professional prices, so you have to appear as a professional business right from the beginning. So get a nice logo, get a nice branding. If you do have a website, make sure that it looks very clean, concise, that they get the information that they need. It doesn't need to have a lot of fluff. It needs to have the services you provide, the area you service, what your strengths are, and your service menu. That's it. So keep everything very clean, crisp, and uniform across all of your marketing. Okay, so now that we talked about the business side that nobody likes to talk about, let's get into the fun stuff. So processes. So we want to define all of our processes, our standard operating procedure, and then that kind of segues into the menu of services you provide and setting fees for that. First area, let's talk about the wash process. So this will define how the rest of your detail goes. So what you need to decide is what kind of washes you're going to provide, and this is going to help us get to the tools. So for me, when I first started, I was detailing in the driveway, sometimes in the garage. Well, I wasn't super set up. I did not have a pressure washer. I was using a hose and a bucket and soap. Looking back, I wish that I would have set myself up a little bit better. And then about a year and a half into my process, I realized that I really couldn't use a hose, mainly because I'm here in Idaho. It freezes during the winter. And so the hose and bucket was not working for me. So that's when I had to research options for rinseless wash. What's cool about that is once I started using rinseless wash in the winter, I realized, why am I not doing this all year? It's so much easier. So my business kind of took on a life of its own with rinseless wash. And now, as you can see in my shop, I wash right here in my shop. Identify what types of washes you want to do. Now, likewise, if you're mobile, rinseless wash may not work for you. You may want to you need the whole show of foaming and pressure washing and the whole bit, and that's totally fine. So you need to decide what types of washes you want to provide. Are you going to be doing kind of basic car washes, or are you wanting to do a higher level, thorough wash, meaning, you're spraying out all the fender wells, doing the wheels really good, the barrels. This is where you need to decide what level of washes you want to do. Again, fun part, you can start off really conservative and grow to a different point. So let's talk about tools. So you need to have wash media. And by wash media, we mean what are you using to wash? So you can use, wash mitts, so sponges, that's kind of my choice. Wash mitts are great, especially when doing like a soap and bucket wash. Then I use the sponge for rinseless wash. And you want to have the appropriate brushes kind of to do the emblems, the grills, things like that. Other areas that you need to get into with something finer than a wash mitt. The other tools that I use during the wash process would be maybe a bug scrubber. I know here again in Idaho, we get a lot of bugs on the front. So you want to make sure you have those tools to help you get through that wash faster. You're not going to want to try to scrub bugs off with your wash mitt. So I kind of keep all of those things in my wash bucket all together. Then let's identify what soap we want to use. So again, if you're doing foaming a car, you're going to want to use a foam that is meant for a foam cannon. And then obviously you need the foam cannon. So you want to choose something that is a product that is specifically designed almost like a pre-foam, or something that's going to help that dirt break away from the surface, and that it can also have enough lubricity that you can just go straight into your contact wash. Then you need to choose the soap for your bucket. A lot of guys will just use the regular soap that they also use to foam, or you can choose another of your favorite soap that is, works in a bucket with the contact wash. And then the third type of soap would be a rinseless wash. So obviously my favorite is Absolute. There's a lot of really great rinseless washes on the market, and we all know how those work. You put them in the bucket and you just don't need to pre-rinse or post-rinse. They're great for if you're servicing maybe like businesses. One really nice thing to do that I did when I first opened my business was I would service business complexes. And so that's a good way to get your name out there, where you go to a business complex and you might do 5 washes that day. Rinseless wash is really good for that because you're quick, you're not making a mess in the parking lot, you're not getting overspray on the cars nearby. So I definitely think that people need both systems for sure. But you definitely want to add a rinseless wash. This is a really great time to point out that you need to know how to wash a car. So just in case you don't already know, there's lots of really great YouTube videos out there. There is lots of great information on there. So you want to learn how to wash a car, because keep in mind, if you are mobile or going to a place of business, people are going to be watching you. And then lastly, you need a good drying towel. This was something that when I first started my business, I didn't really understand the quality of this tool. So this is really important because this is going to be safe for the surface. You want a really high quality drying towel. My favorite is the Liquidator, just because I mainly do rinseless wash. So you want to make sure that they are nice, clean, well kept, because you don't want to scratch the surface. You want them to absorb. Everything that helps you be more efficient is going to save you time. You're going to get done faster. And so especially when it comes to tools, you want to make sure that you're choosing tools that will help your efficiency. You don't want to take forever to dry a car. And like I said, when I first started, I didn't know that. And looking back, I remember how long it used to take me to dry the car. So you want to use a really good drying towel. And then for tips and tricks on how to take care of your towels, you can stay tuned here for that, but that is a very vital key as well. And finally, for the car wash process, one of the things that I did not realize in the beginning was the importance of good tools when it came to drying. So I would try to use, cheap drying towels, not great methods. So this is another area that you want to identify what tools work for you. You want really good drying towels. You can use a leaf blower if you'd like, if that helps you get some of the water out of the crack. So you want to have the good drying towels. You want to have your finishing towels, to touch up any glass or anything like that. The right tools when it comes to drying the car. You want to make sure that it's safe for the surface. You're not going to cause any scratching or marring. You want to make sure that you're taking care of them correctly to prevent any future damage. And then there's lots of different types of towels out there. So again, you just have to find which one works for you. There's lots of options. My biggest advice here is just choose high quality drying towels. Next up is wheels and tires. Now, this is an area that you want to make sure that you do your research, you know what you're doing. This, I think, is what I would call a high point of failure. What that means is this is an area that you could potentially cause a lot of damage to somebody's car. So you want to educate yourself on the different materials, whether a car has, brushed aluminum, polished aluminum, if they're powder coated, like you need to know your materials and what the wheels are and how they're finished. This is going to help you decide what products that you want to have on hand and how far you're going to go to clean people's wheels. Because the worst thing to do is to damage somebody's wheel and have to pay to replace it. So set yourself up for success here. So find a safe wheel cleaner, find one that has some ability to kind of break free the brake dust. A lot of the vehicles nowadays have bigger brakes, all that kind of good stuff. It makes a mess. So you want to make sure that you're set up for that. Again, with efficiency, the better your tools and products are, you're going to spend less time cleaning that wheel. Something that when I first started, I would spend like an hour cleaning a set of wheels, and that is way too long. You should be about 5 minutes per wheel. So things that help you get there. Absolutely your tools on this one. So you want to have a good tire brush, a good wheel face brush, a barrel brush, and then kind of a fine-tuned brush for maybe say the lug nuts or the tight spaces in between the spokes. Another great tool for wheel cleaning is like a wheel sponge or a wheel paw, something that you can put on your hand, and it's a specific mitt for wheels that you only use on wheels. And sometimes those softer materials are nice for the more delicate wheels. So the wheels and tires products, I like to choose, for efficiency's sake, a more combo product. So typically I'm going to choose something that is meant for wheels and tires. Now that is going to probably work on like 60% of the wheels that come in here, but then occasionally I'm going to have to jump up to something that maybe has an iron remover in it or something a little bit stronger. In that case, you're going to separate your products. You're going to have one for your tires and one for your wheels, and that's perfectly okay. One other tip for the wheels is I do choose to use a dedicated bucket just for the wheels. You are going to be transferring a lot of brake dust and debris back into that bucket, so I do like to have two totally separate buckets for that. Now, not to say that when you first start out, you can have one bucket, just make sure you wash it really good in between those processes. Now, I didn't talk about this in the wash process because I wanted to save it for the wheel process. Here's where I feel like a pressure washer is vital. I, again, wash rinseless in here, so I'm not using a pressure washer on the body, but I still use it on my wheels and tires. While I started out with a hose and a garden sprayer, that's fine, but I do feel like I should have stepped up to a pressure washer sooner. Now, the key here is you don't need the best pressure washer on the market. Get whatever fits in your mobile rig if you're mobile, get what works in your garage. I still use kind of a basic, 1800 PSI pressure washer, and that works for me because I'm not typically running like a foam cannon or something. I'm using it to rinse out my wheels and tires, and it works great. If you're doing something like bigger vehicles or you're foaming the vehicle, you may want to look into a better pressure washer. But my advice here is it's a great tool to have. Don't feel like you need it day one, but definitely put it on your list of investments that you want to make. Next up is dressings. So we've cleaned the wheel and tire, and during the finishing process, you're going to want to finish the wheel and tire. Some people like to not use a tire dressing. I always kind of suggest it just because this is an area of the vehicle that you do want that UV protection. What I think a lot of people have concerns about is a shiny tire, and on the market, there's a ton of different tire dressings. So you're going to be able to find which one suits your needs. There's ones that give almost a completely matte, just natural OEM finish, which is nice. And then there's all the way to the glazed donut shine. So you just need to find what works for you. Now, the other thing is you will have customers that will tell you what they want. They will say, I want a shiny tire, or I want a tire that is completely matte. So I do suggest having 3 to 4 tire dressings on hand, just to adapt to whatever you're working on. So let's say it is a sports car. They might want something that's a little bit more satin, a little bit higher shine, because they're kind of the flashy type, right? But then you're gonna have like an F350, a Ford F350, and they might just want nice black tires that aren't going to catch a lot of dust and stuff on the road. So that you might use a more matte tire finish. But I think one of the things for me is I always want every car that I detail or wash to look crisp and finished. Even if you don't like the shiny tire, I still highly advise you to get a tire dressing that is meant for more of a matte to mid satin shine. So definitely there's tons out there. Again, you can do lots of research. I'll tell you some of my favorites, but have a couple on hand because customers do like them. They just may not like that high glazed shine. Real quick, so in the tire dressing space, there's lots of different product types and tools to go with. So some of the ones that I like the most are a water-based silicone dressing, which is going to have a really nice satin finish. They self-level on their own. They're not hard to get off if you have overspray on paint or the wheel. They wipe off super easy. Another one of my favorites is a gel-based dressing. Gel-based dressings, I definitely recommend applying with a brush. It just makes for a nice smooth finish. You can use microfiber applicators. You can just spray them on. There's lots of different tools for applying tire dressing. Again, you just have to find what works for you. This is a big one, the interior process. So this has a lot of different elements and things to consider. This is an area where you need to decide on your service menu what levels you want to provide. For me, I really only have one way. I know that a lot of detailers will do like an express detail or a level 1, level 2 interior, and they take things out like cleaning carpets. For me, I'm kind of a keep your menu simple type of person. I provide the service that I provide and I don't know where to stop. I only know all the way. So I only have one interior option, which is all the way. I also have some efficiency tips here on that, but I'll share that later. So interior process, you have to decide, if you want to be offering those expanded services like carpet, seat cleaning, things like that. So a couple of the things that you need to consider, especially on the tools. This is where you're gonna have the most amount of tools, is in this segment. So you're gonna want tools to start with your vacuuming. So you're gonna wanna have all the tools that go with that, all of the nozzles for your vacuum. You're gonna wanna have a good vacuum. You're gonna wanna have the tools to attack pet hair. This is something that, this is the biggest time sucker on the interior. This is gonna take you the most amount of time. So you wanna have the tools that are gonna help you be most efficient. So dog hair removers, there's lots of silicone devices out there. There's pet stones. There's, the attachments that go on the vacuum that help pull up the pet hair, but you definitely wanna make sure that you're set up in that area. Then you need all of your interior scrubbing tools. So you're gonna want, something to scrub the seats with. I like a good interior scrub mitt. You're gonna want something to do the bigger surfaces and scrub those down. You're going to need brushes. Personally, I like to have many different brushes of different sizes, just for all the different, there's a range of different sizes of cup holders and map holders and all sorts of different compartments that you wanna make sure you have all the brushes to get into those areas. I even like to make sure that I have on hand some of the finer detail like interior Q-tips, things that fit into the vent. You wanna make sure that those are the details you don't leave behind. So not only do you wanna make sure you have all of the little tools, some of the bigger tools, things that you may not be able to start with, but that I think are important, is a steamer. This was a big one for me. When I added in the steamer, I became much more efficient in my interior process. I highly recommend one of those. The great thing about the steamers is there is a range of ones that you can get. You can get steamers that start at $150 all the way up to $1,200. Now, my biggest advice here is the $200 one works great. It's all I've ever used. I'm not looking for something that is going to do really heavy things. I just want to use it to help me get the surfaces clean faster, rinse off any of the products that I'm using, and help me get that next level of clean. For your business, you need to decide what level of steamer that you need. Another important tool is obviously your vacuum. Lots of different vacuums to choose from. I started with a shop vac that I pulled behind me. That served me well for a lot of years. Now I have a built-in central vac. The benefit here is it has a higher lift. I'm able to vacuum faster. I'm not going over the same areas multiple times. It also gives me the ability to keep my hose up in the ceiling, nice, clean, and neat, always put away. You just kind of have to find what vacuum works for you and how often you're vacuuming. Vacuuming for me is a big part of my business because I want literally the carpets to look perfect. So the vacuuming was really important to me. I also live in a demographic where every single person has a dog. So I struggle with dog hair every single car. You want to make sure that maybe you can get away with your steamer if you're not working on super dirty cars. But I do recommend having an extractor. And here's my caveat here is I have an extractor, but I don't ever use it in the typical extraction way. So I know that we see out there on social media a lot of people doing those, soaking videos and then sucking them up, and they look super cool. Don't do it. Those seats never dry out. So I use my extractor as a dry extraction method. So I'm using it, I choose the products that are gonna get the stain out the safest with the least amount of introducing water to the surface. And then I will use my extractor on super dirty vehicles just to extract some more of that dirt and the product back out of the surface. But I don't add a lot of water to the surface. You can also, like I said, use your steamer as part of your carpet cleaning process. Again, that's going to help break up all the dirt, get it out of there, but again, not add a lot of water to the surface. And then as far as the products, this is probably my favorite part because this is the part that you can be the most creative for you with. I like to use a product that is totally safe for the interior. So one thing I will highly recommend against is using just an all-purpose cleaner. I do like to use a dedicated product that specifically says it is for the interior surfaces, all interior surfaces, leather, vinyl, plastic. You want it to be safe for all those areas. This is another area that you can really get yourself in trouble. If you're using the wrong product, you could cause bleach stains on the leather seats. You can cause them to dry out and crack, and we just don't want to do that. So use a dedicated interior cleaner, and then you want to make sure that it is able to be wiped off easily, that it's not going to cause any staining. Again, as far as the drying out, even though I choose to use a protectant following up all of my details, you want to make sure if you're not doing that, that you're not using a product that dries the surface out. So choose your products wisely here. And again, this is an area where you may need a couple different ones. Primarily I'm doing a lot more maintenance details at this point in my career. So I'm not wanting to use those super harsh, meant for dirtier surfaces, chemicals, because it's just not necessary. So I always do the least aggressive. So now I'm using a product that is meant more for maintenance of vehicles. So I like to have a range because when that super dirty vehicle does come in, I want a little bit more of a heavy hitter. So then you want to have all of your other interior products beyond the cleaning. That's the most important part. So I kind of break my interiors down into the cleaning portion and then the finishing portion. So we've covered the cleaning. When we move into the finishing, you want to make sure that you have the appropriate protectants. I choose an interior protectant that is not shiny, not greasy. It just gives that natural OEM finish. And then I also like to have a dedicated leather protectant. If the leather seems like it's a little bit drier or things like that, I will bump up my level to a dedicated leather protectant. But otherwise, I try to choose one for efficiency that can go on all surfaces. But you want to have that option. And then towels. This is another big one. So I have a couple different types of interior towels. My favorite is just to use like an edgeless 365. That is my main interior towel. But again, you want good towels. You don't want ones that have like edges or tags, anything on them that can scratch the surfaces of the vehicles. A lot of the later vehicles have maybe what we call piano black or shinier finishes. So you want to make sure that your towels are in good working order, that they don't have anything stuck in them, and that there's nothing on them that can scratch those surfaces, because the scratches are very difficult to get out. And then for glass, I like to have a nice dedicated glass cleaner. You don't want to use anything like Windex or something that's not meant for automotive glass. So I always choose a glass cleaner that is specifically meant for this type of glass. You can choose something like a foam-based aerosol or just a liquid glass cleaner. You just want to make sure you're using one that is specifically meant for cleaning interior of glass. Then this is probably my most important, is you want to make sure you have really good glass towels. I'm kind of a big advocate of having dedicated glass towels. So my glass towels, I only use for the glass. I like to color code them. I use a microfiber applicator and then a blue FTW. That tells me that that is for glass since it's blue. So those stay, I even have a dedicated glass drawer because I want to make sure nothing contaminates my glass towels. So glass can be one of those areas that's probably one of the most frustrating for detailers. And so it's something where I give the most effort to my tools and products to make sure that I get it done efficiently, no streaks. So interiors are not everyone's favorite thing to talk about. And I know that one of the trends in the industry right now is for people to really just want to focus on exterior paint correction and coating, but you definitely want to stay up on your interiors because it's essentially market proof. So if there's a dip in the market, a dip in the economy, people still need their interiors cleaned. So it's kind of one of those maintenance processes that people are still going to take care of the interior of their car. So make sure you stay up on your processes here. And it's an area that you want to make sure you take very good care of your process, keeping consistent, doing every car in the same exact order for efficiency. This is where you can make the biggest impact for the customer on the before and after. So again, make sure you take your photos like we talked about before. This is not the area that you want to kind of skimp on as far as education and tools. The more efficient you are, the better you are at it. I promise this is gonna pay back for you in the end. Interiors are a big deal, so don't look over this section. Next up is exterior care. So when we get to the portion of the vehicle that we are doing the exterior beyond the wash, you can kind of decide here again what services that you wanna provide. If I'm not doing paint correction and coating, I'm doing just a wash clay seal. This is my standard exterior detail. And the reason for this is that, and again, you have to decide your demographic, what works for your customers. But for me, I try to not do any paint correction unless I'm doing a coating. Now, there's always the time to do like a one-step polish to kind of, maybe make the paint look a little bit better. But I promise you, if you try the wash clay seal process, it's absolutely amazing. And usually the car looks like you just polished it. So, usually what I do for this, if I'm doing a detail, is during that wash process, if I'm doing the rinseless wash, I will go straight into my wash clay seal while the car is still wet. So I will use a clay lube. I like to use something with sealant in it as my clay lube, as long as the product is meant for that. And then I will use a good clay media. When we're talking clay here, this is a synthetic clay, so not traditional clay. You would not do this with traditional clay. So it's synthetic clay mitt, there's towels, there's clay scrubbers. You'll want one of these in your bucket, and you do this while the car is wet. And what this does is this decontaminates the paint. This is definitely a step that a lot of detailers skip over, and it's actually the most important step. So you want to get that contamination off the surface, because this is what helps the car get clean when they wash it. There is certain levels of contamination that do not come off with our normal wash. So we've all seen cars that go through the car wash and they don't get clean on the bottom or the back end of SUVs. And that is because there is contamination present on the surface that the dirt is staying attached to. So the biggest part of an exterior detail is we want to get the contamination off of the surface so that it actually gets clean, and also so that the protection that we put down actually bonds with the surface and provides protection. Again, I choose the wash clay seal process. This allows me to decontaminate and put down a sealant in the same step, which saves a ton of time, has fantastic results, and is a huge moneymaker on my service menu. You just want to make sure that you're super clear and concise with your customer as far as just a basic exterior detail, what service you're providing. And then this is the area where you can use other services as an upsell. For instance, if you wanted to use like an all-in-one polish that kind of cleans up the surface and lays down a protection, you can do that, but I would use that as an upsell or an additional charge. I'm just kind of one that I don't like to polish unless we're permanently protecting that correction. You could also upgrade the sealant to something with a higher SiO2 base so that they get longer term protection. This is another great, upsell or add-on, something to throw in to add more value to that detail for them. This is an area where you can really be creative on your service menu and your upgrades for your customers. Also in the exterior process, you want to focus on the exterior glass. So this is where you're going to decide if it has water spots on it. Do you need to polish the glass? This is a wow area for the customer. If you choose to polish the glass, which is super easy to do, even just during a normal detail, it provides that wow factor when the customer walks up. So I like to make sure that the glass on the exterior looks amazing. So if that means I have to polish it, I always go back over after my wash. I always go back over and clean the exterior glass really well with a glass cleaner or a glass finisher, something that might leave behind a little bit of SiO2 protection, almost like a Rain-X if you think about it. So it's going to provide that hydrophobic and also make them stay cleaner longer, right? And be easy to clean up next time. The other area that I like to really focus on is the front windshield. This is an area where people notice if they, get super dirty, if the bugs are not off, or something that the bugs wash off easier. That's another touch point where your customer is going to recognize your efforts. So then obviously to finish the exterior, I always choose a nice dedicated detail spray. And this, I just go back over the car. I do kind of a final wipe, make sure that I got up any drips or smears, smudges, anything like that. So I always look at this as like a final inspection wipe, and I will usually use just a dedicated detail spray, whatever works for you again in this process. And I know we talked about tire dressing earlier, so this is also the point in the exterior where I kind of go back over the wheels. Again, I may use a dedicated detail spray, or I may even use a spray sealant to clean the wheels up to leave behind a little bit of protection. Couple quick tips for success when finishing the car though is, again, I know I can't say this enough, is the towels. This is definitely something that I've learned over my career. You have to have good towels. It really does set you up. So when doing detail sprays, this is an area of frustration for detailers. If you don't have a clean towel that is absorbent, that doesn't leave behind lint, you need to make sure you've cared for it correctly, especially when doing these final detail sprays, because you're looking for that perfect finish. So you don't want to leave behind streaking and linting and all that kind of stuff. So definitely highly recommend having exterior finishing towels. I again choose the FTW just because it's a twist loop, doesn't leave behind any lint. It helps you absorb all of that extra product that you've laid down on the surface and just leaves a really nice finish. So again, in the tools, always choose things that help you be efficient and that work the way that they were intended to. And then a caveat here is obviously if you're using a lot of SiO2 based sealants on the exterior, you may clog up your towels. So you want to make sure you're doing appropriate towel maintenance. I like to do a couple different loads. So I have an exterior load, I have an interior load, and then I have glass. So my glass is totally separate. So if you do have your towels clogged, you just want to make sure that you're using a really good dedicated microfiber soap like Rags to Riches that has the ability to strip those sealants out of your towel and help you get a lot longer life out of your towels. My philosophy is always that exterior detailing is not about being pretty, it's about being protected. So share with your customer why this is the best time to have their car detailed. If it's the winter time, I share with them that detailing's about being protected. It's not about being pretty. And then I will say, December, this is the best time to have your guard detailed because you want the protection level at its highest when the elements in the winter are the worst. It's the harshest on the vehicle exterior. As we get into spring, you want that protection level at the highest because now the bugs are coming, sap, all of this, all the pollen, things like that. If it's summer, I tailor it to UV, sun, sand, bird droppings, bug guts. In the fall, I'm back to, rain, snow, sleet, ice, like all the things. So at any point in the year, I can help the customer understand why the exterior needs to be done. So I really generally focus on doing the whole package because I've never met a car that didn't need to be protected. So for maximum efficiency on the interior, I always start with a really blank slate. So this is where you're gonna wanna spend the majority of your time on the interior is like the pre-vacuum, the blowout, all of that good stuff. So when I'm doing an interior, I would say that like 60% of my time is in this section. So what I do when I go to vacuum is I kind of pre-vacuum, get all the big stuff up, all the chunks, the leaves, the sand. So I get it about 50 to 60% vacuumed to get all the debris out of the way. And then I use an interior blower. This is another one that it took me a while to adopt this process and admit that I needed to do this. And now I can't imagine doing it any other way. So I pre-vacuum, then I use my blow tool. So I use the Ultra Air Blaster. I started with one of like the pistol grip blowers. I don't really like those because they do an concentrated stream of air, and you could catch that airstream on something that's not meant to be lifted. I definitely recommend using a blow tool like the Ultra Air Blaster. This is gonna blow out all those areas that you can't typically see with your regular eye. It's also gonna help loosen all that dirt and debris that's stuck down in the carpet, which is gonna make your carpet cleaning process go much better. So think of this as it's just getting all of the hidden junk out. This is also going to make your final vacuuming much smoother and easier. So then once I get all of my air blasting done, then I go back with my vacuum. This is where I'll grab my vacuum aid, like paint gloss, something that's gonna cut that static electricity for efficiency. It's gonna make this vacuum process go much faster. So here's where I'm gonna grab all of my specific vacuum tools. I'm carrying those around section to section. I'm making sure to move the seats all the way forward, all the way back, and getting in all the cracks and crevices, getting it completely vacuumed out. Now, what I will say is here, I'm not worrying about absolute perfection. So now I'm wanting to get it vacuumed about 90% because I'm gonna do a final vac at the end, because once you start cleaning the interior, using your steamer, you might end up blowing more out of the cracks. So don't worry about spending all that additional time in your perfection vacuuming, because you're gonna have to go back for a final vac at the very end of the detail. All right, so next level of service we want to talk about is what everyone loves: paint correction and ceramic coatings. So this is definitely an area that you want to make sure that you have appropriate training, tools, and that you are ready for this step in your business. This may be 2 months down the road, it may be 6 months down the road. Again, you're gonna have to figure out what works for you, but this is definitely something that you don't want to go into it blind. You wanna make sure that you have the right tools, that you have the right knowledge, that you are charging appropriately. One of the biggest mistakes I see is people wanting to jump into doing paint correction and coating, and they'll go out there and severely undercut themselves and, say, I'll paint correction and coating for $500. And what that does is it devalues yourself, but it also affects the entire industry. You wanna make sure that if you're gonna jump into the service, that you know what you're doing and you're pricing yourself appropriately, because this is the most wear and tear on your body. And this is also the biggest expense to your business, mainly because of the tools you have to buy. The products cost a lot more than spray sealants and things like that. Compounds and polishes are a big expense and a big investment. So you wanna make sure you're ready for this process. So let's talk about what we need to get ourselves set up. First, you need a good tool. Now, there's tons of tools out there. I am a bit of an advocate for making sure that you don't cheap out on this one though. I started with, inferior tools that had severe vibration. They weren't balanced well. It took me longer to paint correct a car because of not consistent balance and things like that. But also over the years, I actually caused quite a bit of physical harm to myself. I have nerve damage in my neck and arms. And if I use a machine that has too much vibration at this point, my entire arms and shoulders, everything falls asleep. I am kind of a big advocate that if you are gonna jump into paint correction, do it right. I tend to stay behind the brands that, put the time and effort into their ingenuity and design and development. Once you've invested in your tool, you wanna make sure to have good polishing pads. Again, don't cheap out on these, because this is where the correction's coming from. So you wanna have a good range of polishing pads. You wanna have all the different colors from heavy cut to light cut and everywhere in between. You're gonna need wool, you're gonna need finishing foam, all of that, so that you are able to get a really good correction. Because one of the things to remember once we get to the ceramic coating phase is we're locking in whatever correction you do. So you wanna make sure you're doing a really good correction. You wanna make sure that you're doing what the level to which you agreed with the customer, whether that be a 1-step or a 2-step, 3-step, you wanna make sure that you're providing that level of service because you are gonna be locking that in with the ceramic. You wanna make sure that you have your tools, which is the polisher and the pads. You wanna make sure that you have an adequate amount of pads for the vehicle. I recommend having 6 of that color. So when you're doing your test spots and you determine what pad you're gonna be using on that vehicle, you wanna make sure that you have at least 4, but ideally 6 pads of that color, just to make sure that your correction can stay consistent. If the pad becomes too saturated with product and clear coat, you're not gonna have the same correction on the fender that you finish on versus the one that you started on. So make sure you set up yourself for success when it comes there. Then on to the products that you use. I highly recommend having a really strong one-step product, mainly because the majority of what you will be doing when doing ceramic will be a one-step. And what I mean by that is you want to get as much correction out of the one product that you're using. You want to make sure that it finishes down so that you don't have to go back over for a second step. This is the price point that most customers want to pay. When you add in a step, the price for that service significantly goes up. The returns on that are very minimal. We're talking on a one step, you might get 60% correction, and out of a two step, you might get to 70, maybe 75. The return on that diminishes, but the effort on your part is a lot more. So that causes the price to go up. So the majority of what we run into is what we call a one step. So not an all-in-one. That would be a product that has protection in it. So we're talking one step, one pad, one product. You might have cars that require a two-step. Like say it's, really trashed paint, but they want it, much nicer. Maybe they have a vehicle that's new to them, so you've got to go that extra step in your paint correction. Then you want to have a good system that has a good heavy cut compound and a really good polish to finish that out and remove any marring or hazing that may have been caused by the aggressiveness of the compound. I definitely recommend those three products. You want to have a heavy compound, you want to have a one-step product kind of in the middle, and then you want to have that lighter abrasive product for finishing out if you used the compound. Again, lots of products to choose from. Play with them, watch reviews, and find which one works for you. Now, here's also an area that I'm going to really push training on. You want to make sure that you have your skills and abilities to the point of what you are charging. This is definitely one that you can watch videos online, but I definitely recommend going to a training, getting official training on paint correction. You will be much less frustrated and your result will be better. Once we've done the paint correction, now we're ready for ceramic coating. Again, I'm gonna hit the training thing again. You can watch videos, that's fine. I highly recommend you going to ceramic coating certifications, not because I'm one that believes that you need that certificate to apply the coating, but it just helps you better set yourself up for success, and it takes away some of the guesswork and the errors that could be caused, which will then just cause frustration and possibly damage. So ceramic coatings are great. They're something that on our service menu, we all love that. We all love to get to that level, but you want to do this one right for sure. And you can be very successful and profitable, but this is an area where you want to invest money into your tools. You want to use good ceramics. As a whole, customers get a feeling of what ceramic coatings are. So you want to make sure you're giving your customer, a really good product that they feel value in what they paid for. If you choose a ceramic that you've oversold it for its protection level, that reflects upon you as the detailer. And so that is definitely an area that I take really serious. The products that I use, I don't care the brand, I don't care what the promises of it is a reflection of me and my abilities to my customers. So I choose products based on what makes me look the best and what serves them the best. So I think that's a really important thing. So research the coating companies, find the longevity, the level that works for you. Like for me, one of the check boxes is it had to hold up to salt. In some areas that's not an issue, but in my area, it definitely is. Our coatings here, because we do use a salt brine on our roads, can definitely clog the coatings. And so I needed to find a coating that didn't clog easily. I needed to find a coating that didn't scratch easy in car washes, because since I am a one bay shop, I don't have time to wash my customer's car. I needed something that they could go through the car wash. Not ideal, but it's a necessity in life. We talked about the polishers, we talked about the pads. Now we've talked about the brand of ceramic coating that you choose. You want to set yourself up for success on the install. So you have to make sure that you have the appropriate towels. You want the good, leveling towels, the bright wipe off towels. Again, this may be tailored to the specific brand. So you kind of want to have the ability to test them out. So, research the towels, find the ones that work best for your coating or that work best for you. This is not an area that I try to save expense on, because how the towels absorb the coating and how they work with it. You don't want to be introducing any marring or striping in the coating, and you don't want to have it not absorb the coating. You don't, because that could lead to leaving high spots. Build the price of these tools into your fees. This is why you don't want to go out and price the coatings at $500, because you are going to have an investment here on not only the polisher, the pads, the coatings, and the towels. So build that all into your price and plan for that, because those are all things that you have to do a successful coating. So my last tip on ceramic coatings, they can be a super profitable part of your business, but this is an area that I focus with my customers on education. Presenting coatings to them and getting them to see the value in them is pretty easy for me, but I will say that I have done my work on the education. A lot of customer education is really important, but this is the area where it's the most important. When presenting coatings to your customers, make sure you're super honest. Don't oversell the coating, don't oversell the correction. I usually like to undersell actually on the correction. I will tell them maybe 60% of these defects are gonna come out, but I would rather end up with 80 and have it exceed their expectation. I always set myself and the process up for success. I explain to them exactly why we're doing the coating, all of the things, it's harder than factory clear coat. It's gonna provide true chemical resistance to things like bug guts, salt, bird droppings, things like that. So I explain all of that to them, the benefits of doing a ceramic, providing a sacrificial layer so that if something does happen, a scratch or something, we have something to fix rather than jeopardizing factory clear coat. In no cases do I like to do that. I like to preserve that as much as possible, which is why I don't do paint correction without doing a coating, especially on newer vehicles, is it's not worth, taking that clear coat off if the same thing is going to happen. Make sure you really stick on the education and then the maintenance. This is where in your schedule, you're gonna build yourself out, for recurring maintenance customers. So not only on details, but ceramic as well. You wanna educate them on the care of it. If they do go to the car washes, ask them to get out and, wipe the drip marks down. That is one thing that most ceramic is not protective against is water spots. So they want to get out, they want to clean up their car. And then I usually have my customers bring their car back to me. So I let them know, in about a year or 12 to 18 months, you're going to want to bring your car back in. We're going to do a ceramic maintenance appointment on that. What that's like is it's like going to the dentist. You're going to come in, I'm going to wash it, I'm going to decontaminate it, I'm going to pull off any contamination that is not hurting the ceramic, but it might be sitting on the outside. We call it clogging, which, not all of them do it, but it's a good thing to check for. You want to decontaminate it, reseal it, kind of revive the coating to like day one. And the more they stay up on the maintenance, the longer that coating's going to last. So they're just protecting their investment. I also use this opportunity to explain to my customers that this is a great time to get your interior done as well. We make sure we get all the areas you can't see, we get it all cleaned out. We protect the leather and the vinyl, and we just kind of rejuvenate everything. So I like to do those together, but when presenting it to the customer that this is a great time to just totally reset your car and really keeping it like a brand new vehicle for years to come, that really resonates with the customers. Make sure you provide education. This has helped me in my business retain all of my customers. I have very little turnover, and it got to the point where my schedule was just repeating itself like every 6 months, and I can't tell you how great that is. So really stay up on the education with your customers. Now that I've kind of walked you through some of the products and tools that you might need to start up your detail business, let's go back to business for a second. So one of the things that I also found super helpful in my career was I tried to operate for a lot of years off of my brain. I kept all of my customers' information filed away in my brain. I had it in my calendar, but I kind of kept every situation stored in my brain. After about 5 years, there was no more storage left. And so I started to forget things and go, now what was the deal with that car? When did I do that car? So one of the things that I can't say enough is I really think that a step to setting yourself up for success is having software. So in our market, there's lots of different companies for detailing software. So this software is going to be where you keep track of all of your customers, you schedule all of your appointments, but the biggest beauty that I was missing the first couple years was it keeps a complete history of that vehicle. So you are going to have all the service dates, exactly what service you did. It's going to keep track of all of that for you. But the best part is now these softwares have the ability to text your customers reminders. You can set it up, a lot of it, it's so customizable. You can set reminders when it's been 6 months since they've been in. You can set specific reminders for ceramic customers when it's been a year. You can send reminders to customers that haven't been in over X period of time. And so this allows you to kind of just do the work and not run the business. The software will do it for you. So I do think that this is really important for customer communication, keeping up with your customers. They love reminders, right? So the texting ability to send automatic text is fantastic. It also keeps track of your financials. So while you still may need like a side financial software like QuickBooks or something, this is going to keep track of all of your goals. So it's going to show you what your revenue is coming in. It's going to show you what your goals are. And what you have scheduled, which is very, very beneficial when it comes to scheduling. And when you get to the point where you go, can I take a day off? You can look at your schedule and see where you start to become really profitable, and you can start to adjust your schedule that is, where you're not, just grinding it out because you just opened a new business. So I cannot stress enough a detailing software. This will also help you with your upsells. You can send quotes to people. So you can actually send multiple levels. So you can send them, if we just detail your car, it's this much. If we do the paint correction and coating, it's this much. And these are the things that I will add in for you. And that may be like a windshield coating or a wheel coating, or if they do the ceramic, you might do the interior detail for free. And so it gives you that ability to send a quote, they agree to it, and then it automatically schedules it, which is so great. The other nice thing with the software is if you do have a website, you can integrate it with your website so that people can schedule their own appointment right there on your website, which again, that frees up your time. It keeps your phone from ringing, and it makes you more efficient and more professional. The other thing that the softwares do is they can invoice your customer for you. So you are completely hands-off on the credit card processing, the payment. You send them the invoice as soon as you're done with the car. In my case, my customers have to pay for it before they pick it up. You can, again, tailor that to how you need, but it is nice to be able to have the ability to invoice them, and it's all taken care of, hands-free. It's awesome. So I'm definitely a big fan of detailing software. The last thing on the software, which this also segues into my next section, is you set up all your services in the software, and that's what attaches and does your fees for you. So it also has a checklist. So as you're starting out, you can, sometimes get confused and be like, oh, did I clean the vanity mirrors? Did I do this? Did I do that? There's actually a checklist in there that during the appointment, you're checking off your things, which I found only because I'm so crazy busy that it definitely helps keep me on track. But when you're new and you're setting up those standard operating procedures, it helps keep you on track, which makes you more efficient if you do everything in the same order every single time. So speaking of putting those services into the software, here's where you have to decide what services you're offering. So you want to make your menu of services, and I recommend keeping it simple. Don't make it too complex. That confuses customers, honestly. So figure out what works for you if you're mobile, and also what tools you have. So if you don't have all the fancy tools like a steamer and extractor, you may not be offering a level 3 interior, which is like the full enchilada, right? But then if you're like me and you want to take the guesswork out of it, you only offer the full enchilada. So if you give them the option of, say, not extracting the seats or the carpets or things like that, I find that systematically that throws me off, and it will actually take me longer to detail their car because I want to just be going, A, B, C, D. And if I have to take D out of there, it actually takes me longer to get back on track. So for me, I chose to not offer that to them, and then they don't even know that that's an option. A lot of times I feel like if a customer comes in and says, well, I just want an express interior, what they mean is they want the whole thing, but they want to pay a less price. So usually what I'll do is I like to use leading questions that they don't really have an answer for. So I will say, I could do an express detail, and that would be this price. But then within that, I have to take out a bunch of things. So, and I will actually walk them to their car and I'll say, what do you want me to leave? Do you want me to leave all these stains on the seats? Do you want me to leave the stains on the carpet? Do you not want me to clean the center console? They only have one answer, and it's, well, no, I wanted that done. And so it helps you justify your services. So if you really do want to provide an express detail, you line out the exact items that you're covering, and that might just be a very basic wipe down, a very basic vacuum, but definitely set those expectations for them. Let them know what they're getting for that level. Decide what services you want to provide and line out what you include in that service. So for instance, on my full detail, it tells them they're getting a hand wash, a decontamination, and a sealant. And it says does not include any paint correction. That way they know no polishers touching their car, no scratches are being removed. So I line out like what it does not include. So, I'm pretty particular about that because it helps to not have confusion and frustration later between your client and yourself. So figure out what services you want to provide, set those up, set up what they include, and then set your prices. And here's where you want to be consistent across the board with your messaging. So if you do a service menu and you publish your prices, make sure to keep that consistent. If you have print material, your website, what you email to people, and within that software, just be consistent. Have only those services provided. So for me, I only have 3 services, which is going to be interior only, exterior only, a full detail, and paint correction and ceramic coating. That's pretty much all I offer. Now, I do have an add-on section for services, and what helps here is for the customers to understand what's not included and what things they could add on. So in my add-on services, I will have headlight correction, engine detailing. So when they see that that's an add-on, they now know that that's not included in a regular detail. So engine detailing, biological cleanup, emergency services. So if somebody has, I've had this happen, chicken left out in their car in 108 degrees overnight, did not go well. That falls under emergency. That does not fall under a regular detail. So you want to have your add-on section, what services you can provide. Now, this is the section that grows as your business develops because you might end up doing trainings for tint, PPF, different services like that. So those would be, you would grow that add-on service. But in the beginning, keep it really simple. You also want to tailor this to the business type that you want. You may not want to be doing, super trashed cars, or like one for me is I don't necessarily want to do quick pre-sale details. And what that means is that's kind of dealership level, lipstick on a pig type situation. I don't really want to do those because I only want to do, the full, restoration detail. The quick ones actually take more effort and you're making less money. So, tailor it to what you want. Now, I know a lot of really successful detailers that do market themselves to the dealerships, and that's great. But that's where we talked about in the beginning, you have to find your customer demographic and what you want to be working on. So this is where you can grow out your add-on services. Just make sure you price them right. And then this also helps you when offering a quote. You can put, here's the full detail, here's if we do headlight correction, for instance, and then they choose which services they want. And it's so great. It's so great to have defined services, defined fees, and you just stick to that. So we've talked about all the services available and everything like that. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want to go back over like training and certifications. So a couple things that I feel here is obviously training is really important. When you're first starting your detail business, you may not be able to go to all the trainings, and there's travel involved, there's a lot of cost involved, there's the training fees involved. I myself was, what we call YouTube certified when I first started my business. And I think that as long as you're following the right content, people that truly just want to help and give you tips and tricks and tools to get going, that's totally fair to learn and absorb as much as you can off YouTube. I think that's great, and you should totally do that. As you are able to, though, I do really suggest taking a training program. Especially like on paint correction and coating, absolutely do those trainings. But obviously the all-in, detailing is also so helpful because you will learn tips and tricks for efficiency, which, when we are our own business owners, we're the one in charge of what we make per hour, and we're the one in charge of when we get a raise. So I kind of look at that as an investment that will pay me back very quickly on efficiency. So I do think trainings and certifications are great. I do think they're a great tool for your customer to sell yourself. I think that when you can let them know what certifications you have, if you can let them know, if you're a member of the International Detailing Association, that you are a certified detailer, skills validated, I think that just adds value to you as a detailer. That just creates consumer confidence, which is a big thing. It will also help any of that kind of price negotiation. You are setting yourself up as a professional. So while I don't think certifications are the end all be all, I do think that they provide value on the surface for your customer, just so that they know that you know what you're doing. Because even though we know how helpful YouTube is, you can't really tell your customer, like, I learned everything I know on YouTube. It just doesn't work that way. So, I hope that we are able to provide you guys with tips and tricks, and, that's what we're here to help. But I do think there's definitely a value to a solid training program and certification. I think if you're looking for a good training, I highly recommend joining, what comes to mind is like Facebook. There's a lot of really good Facebook groups. But again, make sure you're finding the right ones that are a positive environment, that are there to help and not judge. I said in the beginning of this video that there's not really a right or wrong way to do this. We all just want to do good and do good things for customers. And so find supportive groups that are going to help you grow, and, that aren't going to judge or tell you how it has to be done. There is a lot of them out there. So find the supportive group. Within those groups is where you'll see the most of the trainings advertised, and you can kind of decide at what level you want to take your business. I know for me at this point in my business, this year I will be taking both a tint training and a PPF training, something that I have not ventured into, but that's kind of, I have everything is, a well-oiled machine in my shop. And so I go, what else can I offer? And so, I might be choosing more of the higher level trainings. So you'll find those out there. Find companies, channels on YouTube that, are there to support the education process. It really is the most important part of your journey, is not only doing the business right, but also your education as a detailer. And I will tell you, it's a moving target. New processes, new products, raw materials change, everything advances year over year. And so you definitely want to stay current with the processes. You want to stay with, what's relevant and what the customers are hearing on just, the consumer side. What's the latest happening. And so, education is ongoing. It never stops. And so regardless if you're a first year detailer or you've been doing it 15 years, you still want to, seek that education so that you are the most current in doing what is best at this time. Also, the paint systems change. So that's the other thing, is you want to stay up on paint systems, manufacturers, all of that good stuff. There's, not only is there YouTube, but there's, there's still print publication. There's great articles, blogs out there from detailers that have been in the business for a long time. So, really, I can't stress education enough, not only for yourself, but so that you have the tools to give the education to your customers. So let's cover real quick what are my 3 biggest regrets at this point in my career. So I think number 1 would be limiting beliefs and limiting my expectation of my business. When I set up my business, I, just kind of threw it out there. I mean, I did get my license, I did get insurance, so I didn't skip over that part, but I did skip over maybe the legitimacy of what my business could do. A lot of it was just, I lived week to week. I didn't plan out, goals. I didn't have goals for myself. I had a weekly goal, but I didn't have a goal for myself. I didn't have a support network. I think that's a big one. I'm sure a lot of you have heard me talk about that before. I worked alone with, I didn't pay attention to online stuff. I literally worked alone for like 5 years. And I mean, it was almost the death of me. So I think just setting your business up right, having goals, and having a plan. I didn't necessarily have a plan. So definitely that is one of my biggest regrets. Even though it worked out for me in the end, it was a lot of fighting through the through the mud, and it was not a lot of fun. So definitely have a plan. Don't do it the way I did, which was literally I limited my beliefs to week to week. So that was one of my biggest mistakes. My second biggest regret was proper knowledge, tools, and chemicals. I chose the wrong tools in the beginning based on price, and I mean, I wanted what was cheap, right? I didn't want to spend a ton of money. I used the wrong tools. I caused a lot of damage to my body, so I didn't take care of myself. I tended to believe at that time that I was working so hard during the day that I didn't really need to take care of myself after, making sure that I was working all my muscle groups, not just the ones that pertain to detailing. And also I did not take care of my mental health. Something that's not talked about a lot is being your own business owner is really hard. So we all think like, oh, it sounds great to work for yourself, but with that comes a lot of stress. It's all on you. And so I think that, setting yourself up for success and being honest and realistic about what your business can do is a big one. I know that for years I was not charging the right fees, and I was working so hard, destroying my body. I was tired of being cold and wet and dirty and looked at as, the car washer. And so, definitely set yourself up for what you want to be and take care of yourself. And then as far as the chemicals that you're using, I wouldn't necessarily say that I was using bad chemicals, but I know that I was using them incorrectly. I was using tools incorrectly, and I was doing processes that were taking me 10 times as long. And so, that is definitely one of my biggest regrets, was just not educating myself as a whole. I would watch some YouTube videos and I would learn some things, but I didn't check every box. And so that was definitely a big regret. My third biggest regret is that I didn't document my journey. So, the first several years that I was in business, I barely took any photos. I didn't take any photos of my workspace, the tools that I was using. I did take some pictures of the cars that I was working on, but not really where I could document my journey. And I think that's one of my biggest regrets, is that I've worked so hard and I have become successful, and I don't have anything to look back on or to tell the story. And I'm a little bit bummed about that. I also because of that, I didn't integrate myself with other detailers. I allowed the thought of competition to enter my head. And it's so funny to look back at how I used to think that other detailers in my area were competition, and now they're just friends, and that together we can build such a better community. And so now I don't look at anybody as competition except myself. And so I think that is a huge regret of mine as well, was not documenting my journey. I have a lot from the last 6 years, but I don't have any of the years that built me to where I am now. And that's a bummer. So, I think that's the best part, is you're just starting out, and you will just start out with a garden hose sprayer and a Lowe's bucket. I wish I had those pictures. I really do. I wish I had the pictures of what I looked like at the end of the day. It was a journey. So document your journey, keep track of that, because one day you're going to look back and you're going to see how hard you worked for yourself, and that will be very valuable. So, definitely document and keep those memories, because one day it's going to mean a lot. So to summarize, we've talked about having a plan, sticking to it, being realistic with our goals. We talked about marketing, and then we went through all of the processes, the tools you'll need, the products that you need, and kind of just the way to break those down. We talked about software, we talked about service menus, that's a big one. We talked about education. So wherever you are in your detailing journey, I hope you found this video helpful. For more videos like this, stay tuned right here at the Rag Company YouTube channel, and thanks for watching.